Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy RoundTable. I am your host, Dr. Douglas Ham. I am so excited to be with you. Today we're going to talk about God's feasts. Ooh, are they prophetic? Could there be something to the feast? Now, if you've never heard about the feast, we're going to give you a really quick rundown. We're going to talk about them the whole hour. All right, so we're going to get into this. All right, but there's 7 feasts, and no, they're not Jewish feasts. Okay, they're actually God's feasts. How do I know that? Because, well, the Bible says so. Right? We can go to Leviticus 23. It talks all about God's feasts, and He says, "Hey, these are my feasts." All right, so they might be slightly important since they're God's feasts, and there might be something that is kind of important. All right, and just a really quick preview. It turns out that Jesus, he was crucified on Passover. He was in the tomb for unleavened bread, and then he rose on first fruits. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that, right? So, without further ado, let's get into the show. I'm so excited to be with everybody. Oh, and really quick before we get going, I want to let everybody know that the Nimrod video that I posted about a week ago, that was a new thing that we're doing. I can do some faceless videos, and we're going to start a new channel so that it can just be focused on that and a little bit of motivational videos. So I will be giving you the link for that. I would love it if you guys would go once I have that, and if you could subscribe, that would really, really help. It just kind of helps the algorithm. You know, the algorithm gets kind of weird because we hit like 1,900 views and then it just stopped. So that was a bummer. But anyway, let's get into what we have today. Joel put together a little PowerPoint for us, so we're pretty excited about that. So Joel, take it away. And I'm excited about today's show. I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
And we clicked on the right meeting. I'm pretty excited about that.
That's helpful.
There was no we to that, Joel. That
was yeah, I did feel alone. I tell you, and it's a rough crowd. That's not the slide that I want. There it is. Okay, cool. So anyway, we're talking about the Moedim tonight. And whoops, let me get my cursor over to that side, and then we're all set. Whoop. Did you guys bail out on me? Huh.
We're
there
here.
We go. Okay, it's clicking now. Okay, all right, good. So you guys talk about the menorah all the time, about the 7 festivals and how they match up on the menorah. The problem is technically the Sabbath isn't part of one of those 7, so the Sabbath in Leviticus 23 is listed first. So even though it makes sense, it's not really listed. So, we start out with Passover, and then we go into first fruits, and we go into Passover, which is unleavened bread, and then first fruits after that. Well, if you're Jewish, you don't cite any of the other 2. You only cite Passover. And the reason for that is because the Christians have been taking over these festivals and really claiming that Yeshua resurrected on first fruits, and that his sinless life was part of the unleavened bread time frame. Well, that's a problem for them. So why cite those? And also it gets kind of complex. So basically we've got the difference. So once again, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, his resurrection day, then Pentecost during the summertime in kind of the middle of the menorah. Then we go to trumpets, or Yom Teruah, then atonement, which is Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot, which is tabernacles. And it does, as you can see on the right-hand side, it does reference his sacrifice, his burial, his resurrection, the fullness of the Gentiles, they argue here. There are many different fulfillments of this, but it is interesting. And so you'll find it in the Bible, you'll find references constantly, but then you also have to look for the fact that it is a moed. So what does that mean? It's H4150, which is an appointed time, a place, a meeting. Now, really, the word moed can be used like when Moses goes with Aaron to the tabernacle. Well, it's the moed. It's a meeting place. It's a meeting time. It's whatever it happens to be. It can be translated as feast, but keep in mind, Yom Kippur is a fast. Sometimes it's about eating. It's more about a designated time of meeting and meeting with God. Sabbath is the first one again listed, and so that's very interesting. And then, so let's go ahead and start it out with the moed from chapter 23. Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai, which you are to proclaim as holy convocations, are my designated times." It doesn't say of the Jews. It doesn't say of Aaron or Moses. it's God, and it is the way it's stated in the text. Work is to be done in 6 days. The Shabbat is that first moed, and it's a holy convocation. Shabbat for God, even in your homes. These are the designated times, the holy convocations. These are your designated times, people, and you're supposed to proclaim it. So once again, we see Passover is called Pesach. Unleavened bread is called Hag Matzot. First fruits is Yom HaBikurim, which is first weeks. Shavuot, which could also be Pentecost. Trumpets is Yom Teruah, technically. Atonement, I call it Yom Kippur, is Yom Kippur, covering. Tabernacles is Sukkot, and we're supposed to keep those festivals. And I'm arguing that if people aren't interested in this, that they might be lost during the end times, because Daniel warns about this, and I'll just show it to you in the Hebrew here a little bit. Doug, if you want to jump in and comment on any of the Hebrew, please do. But you'll see the yellow arrow or orange arrows where it's La Moed, and then Moedim, and the Kotzi. I don't know how you pronounce that one, but it's a half.
Yeah.
Can you see it even?
Yeah.
Ketzi.
Yeah. Vachetzi. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So basically, at some point in time during the end of days, according to Daniel 12, which is about the end of days, we should have things reconciled to the Moed, the Moedim, and the half point. And whether you go 7 years or 3.5 years, it should reconcile. You would be at a loss if you weren't at least observing it. Do you agree, gentlemen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I see this is that this is talking about, I think there's going to be 2 of these basically, that you'll have time times half a time times 2, right? So I still hold to that basic traditional dispensational perspective in that regard. So, but yeah, I mean, the word moed, it's a very interesting word, right? You have the sun, moon, and stars are for the times and seasons, right? So there's definitely something there, and yet here it very much is referring to a time. I think that you could also see a moed, because there's from one moed to the following moed. That's always a year, right? So you're always going to have a year. In fact, the word chag, which is really interesting, chag in Hebrew is actually hajj in Arabic. And what do you do on a hajj? Well, you go to Mecca, right? You go and you make a pilgrimage, right? And that's exactly the same thing as a chag, is that you're making a circuit. All right. Now, some of our flat Earth friends, they make a big deal about the chug ha'aretz, and because and I've made the argument that actually I think what the Earth is doing is it's making a circuit versus more than just being a circle. I think it's a circuit that the Earth is making around the sun, but that's another story. So, every time you have a moed, there is a circuit that's happening. You're going to Jerusalem and you're going back home, right? So that's the basic idea of a chag, is some kind of a coming and going experience. So,
I thought it was singular, though. In other words, it would be like a pilgrimage. For instance, they were commanded for the Feast of Unleavened Bread to do a pilgrimage. And then they would do another pilgrimage for Shavuot, and then they would do another pilgrimage for Tabernacles.
They do 3.
And again, it's sort of, I mean, the traditional dispensational view, it's overkill in both Daniel and in Revelation. Revelation clearly spells out a time frame. If we take it literally as those 1,260 days and don't have I guess a historicist view where they're years. And it says 42 months, and again, it's Revelation 12 is I don't want to say mimicking Daniel, but it's drawing heavily on Daniel. And Daniel also has this 1,290-day period and 1335. So
that comes right after this section. Yep.
Yeah, it's either overkill, and God is trying to really emphasize this 3.5 year end times period, or my thought process in doing this was what moed or moedim might be fulfilled that has already at least been partially, if not even completely filled. Like most people would say Passover would be something Yeshua fulfilled. He's not going to ever come back and then again die as the lamb, as Passover. But what prophetic events might occur on a future Passover or during the Feast of Unleavened Bread or on a first fruits? In other words, I personally believe that the man of sin, the son of perdition, the beast, it's going to be on a first fruits where he does this deception and declares to be God. Like his deadly wound, I believe he's going to literally appear to die or die, be resurrected, his deadly wound are healed. And then you just count forward 3.5 years and you're in the fall feast.
Why wouldn't it be that way, Scott? I mean,
I think it is as well.
No,
yeah,
I agree. But what I'm saying is on this Moed half, I'm seeing this being maybe a fulfillment somehow perhaps in the very last year of this age. In other words, something's fulfilled, so and we've got that cut short verse. I don't claim to understand it all, but I think that what that's referring to maybe in the very final year. So we're in the Great Tribulation, we're in the final year of this age, and in that very final year, major prophetic events are fulfilled. Much like Yeshua's life, I think 70-80% of prophecies he fulfilled were fulfilled literally in the final week. Yes. And I believe things like I personally believe the trumpets may actually not even start until that final year, and then they follow the Moed. In other words, yeah, you're shaking your head, but
because it's going to be tight. Oh my God.
Exactly. That would be Look at how much Yeshua fulfilled in 7 days. And we got a 7-month period for a bunch of stuff to be fulfilled.
Here's why I disagree with you. Because in chapter 9 of Revelation, you've got the 150 days. And so you've got to have during the trumpets 150 days at least to get things done.
Okay, and interesting. And that's the 5th trumpet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so the 5th trumpet and the 5th feast is what feast? Yom Teruah.
So okay.
The 5th trumpet could start 5 months earlier, 30-day months, just like in Genesis and the flood account, end on a Yom Teruah. Okay. The Yom Kippurim or Day of Atonement being the theme of the 6th seal, the 6th bowl. Okay. And so again, I think that's what's happening here is these trumpets are going to be really poured out. Not poured out, but blown and released over the final seven months of this age. Okay. So again, I could be totally wrong. People listen, and you guys know by now, I am very fluid and wiggly when it comes.
Oh yeah, we know that,
and we should be.
We expect that.
Well, it drives me crazy now when these people are so dogmatic on something. When you can get 10 prophecy geeks in the room that have studied this out, prayed about it, listened to a lot of different understandings and teachings, and you'll have 20 different opinions.
Scott, you've never had to go back and re-edit all of your work from 15 years ago and either throw it away or go through it. And you have to get your kids involved and your wife, and you all dig through and re-edit everything. Horrible.
Well, mine's on video.
End of the world.
Yeah. Well, when Doug and I first started doing this, we did a show on the 2 witnesses. And at that point in time, I believe the 2 witnesses would testify and witness during the first 3.5 years of a 7-year period. I have since...
Sure.
I no longer
apostatize. Yeah, I call it.
Yeah. And again, but if 2 dudes show up,
let's give a really big overview for a lot of people that don't know much about the fall feast or the feast in general. Because I think we can get into let's get to it because
we'll get to it. Yeah. Okay. So basically, you'll see these times listed. They seem to match up with the Moedim. As I mentioned, Daniel 7:25 sounds a lot like, or rather Daniel 12:7 sounds a lot like Revelation 12:14. These counts, I mean, there's various counts within the Bible. You can't necessarily reconcile them all and say, it matches with first or second half or whatever else. But here you go. Take a peek, people. Digest this away. There are different counts. I argue, and I could be wrong with this, that the Moed count is for observant people, including Jews and Gentiles or, people of Israel that are observing the Moedim. That Sabbath, observant people like us, it pertains to us. whereas the months only seem to count for Gentiles because they don't keep. The Gentiles just keep the months. They really don't keep. They don't look at each day leading up to Sabbath. They don't look at each festival leading to the next festival. But we should be learning that. So I'm hoping that people will start to learn that and notice these time counts. They're there. So this is pretty much the list of all of them. Continuing on, I wanted to show you one more time in the Greek with the Septuagint that it's Kairo, Chiron, Kai, Kairos, Kai, Emisi, Cairo. Okay, so it's the same on the Daniel 12 side as the Revelation 12:14 side. So guys, when we're talking about reconciliation between Moedim, you saw it already in the Hebrew slide. It seems like Daniel and John are both telling us, watch the Moedim, people, be aware of it. Don't be ignorant. This is going to line up with this somehow. I don't know how the wheel's going to work, but it's going to go around like Doug talked about. Okay, the festivals again. So the Passover, according to this chart on the left-hand side, has been fulfilled. Now, I would argue on the upper right-hand side, Passover was fulfilled in Egypt as the firstborn was dying, and then also Yeshua's death. So it's a double fulfillment. Unleavened bread is fulfilled by the coming out of Egypt and eating matzah, and then Yeshua's sinless life. Double fulfillment again. So first fruits fulfilled doubly, coming out of Egypt, and then also Yeshua's resurrection. Pentecost, I would argue 2 times there too. Exodus 19 is definitely that Shavuot experience, that Pentecost experience. And just so you are aware, people too, Shavuot means weeks, 7 weeks. And Pentecost, Penti is 50. So it's basically the same thing. We come to the end of the 7th week, and then we come to the 50th day, and that is Shavuot. Okay, so then Acts 2 does talk about that the same way. So that's when Peter gives the great speech and the Holy Spirit is given. So you could argue the Holy Spirit is given basically at the first Shavuot in Exodus 19:2. Then future is Yom Teruah, and Yom Kippur seems to be future, and Sukkot seems to be future, although many people link Gog, Magog, and World War III to Sukkot at some point in time, and we'll show you proof of that. So once again, Shavuot means weeks, counting to the Omer, and I argue personally, and we may get into a fight over this, but I argue if it's going to be counting the weeks, why not start on a Sunday and count forward? So I'm not on counting the Omer yet. I'm waiting until Sunday, and then I'll start counting. Always a Sunday for me. Then a little bit more about this. So this is a couple of slides, Doug's idea that everything goes in the circle. People, I'm telling you, just learn your, whoa. What do you want, Scott?
Just never mind, man. I'll just make notes, and when you get
done, just make notes. You wanted to get into the months, and I wanted to get through the spring months and then get into the fall months.
Go ahead and go, and I'll just make notes.
So I wanted to kind of roll through the spring. Okay, so once again, fulfilled, death on the cross, our Passover lamb. I wanted you to be aware that as you see the chart on the left, there's no Old Testament references at all. It's all, New Testament, death on the cross, New Testament, burial, New Testament, resurrected on the 3rd day, New Testament, giving of the Holy Spirit in the upper room, Pentecost, return to earth and trumpets, maybe, judgment on atonement, covering, maybe, millennial kingdom during tabernacles, maybe. But the main thing is learn the months, learn where things situate in the months, start noticing it, people, because it might matter in your life. And now we're starting to move towards the fall festival. So if you guys want to jump in now, we're covering, this is another slide that talks about trumpets is based on the rapture. Well, is it? Days of awe. Those are the 10 days between trumpets and Yom Kippur. Are they God's wrath? I don't think so. Second coming. Well, yeah, what?
I was going to say, I would say the trumpets, where I would differ with you, I believe the trumpets are sounding and are finished by the time of Yom Teruah. And then between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippurim, those 10 days are the bowls of wrath being poured out.
Oh my, that would be horrible.
Yeah, Doug, and Doug is correct with me on that. So just
Look, well, we all have our wheelhouses, but yeah, I definitely think that makes a lot of sense. One, because you come to the end of the trumpets, right? And then, as much as I would suggest that, well, I very much look at the book of Revelation as thematically arranged, and I think it makes
Right.
so much more sense. But not everything is exactly, So what I would suggest is that the sixth seal, right, is a big umbrella, and it has a whole bunch of things happening underneath it. Many of which are the 7 bowls that are poured out. And I would agree with Scott that basically when Jesus comes back, that is when you go from 30% volume to 100% volume, right? That's kind of how I see it. Like everything is trashed at that point, mainly because the veil between heaven and earth is going to tear open, and Jesus, who's fiery, is coming back, and the earth is going to begin to melt because here comes Jesus, Mr. Fire, and everybody on planet Earth says, "Uh-oh, here comes this really tough dude. We better go and hide ourselves in the clefts of the rock," right? Which is what we see in the sixth seal. So, again, I kind of feel like we're kind of digging into a lot of minutia without giving a lot of enough overview for some of our people.
Well,
because,
let me do a little overview. And obviously, Joel has covered how Yeshua fulfilled Passover as the Passover lamb. He lived a sinless life. He had no leaven in his doctrine. He had no leaven in his life. He had no sin. I would differ with y'all. I believe he rose on the weekly Sabbath, and what he fulfilled, because he told Mary, "Do not touch me yet. I have not yet ascended to the Father." And when he ascended to the Father on first fruits, that's irrespective of that, he fulfilled first fruits. And then obviously at Shavuot, you have the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and sort of Peter is the spokesman that is making the new covenant proposal to everybody that had gathered for the pilgrimage feast. The one part I would differ with Joel on is I do believe that Yeshua did not by no means fulfilled Yom Teruah, but I do believe he was born on Yom Teruah. Wouldn't be dogmatic on that. I believe Luke 4, when he is pronouncing and announcing the favorable year of the Lord after after the 40 days in the wilderness, that would have been a Yom Kippurim or a Yom Kippur. And then obviously we have him declaring on the last great day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or the 8th day, that he is the living water. So I believe in his first coming that these Moed, or the Moedim, were fulfilled. But Halisa has a great saying. The question, and we were all raised in this Greek mindset understanding, though Joel has done a lot of Hebrew studies, but the question really shouldn't be when was prophecy fulfilled or when will prophecy be fulfilled, but how many times will prophecy be fulfilled? It's cyclical. And that's one thing I think that's really helped my understanding. You're no longer going back and trying to fit everything in a box that happened in 70 AD or in the 1st century BC, or that happened. I see a lot of truth in historicism. Our SDA brethren, our Reformed brothers that believe in historicism, I think there's a lot of truth in that. So as you start to view prophecy as a cycle, and to Doug's point, the theme are the Moedim. Those are the themes. It's not 7 seals, 7 bowls, 7 thunders, 7 trumpets, 7 letters to the 7 assemblies, which I do love Halisa's she calls them memos. These are interoffice memos. These are directed to people that should know better. They're not having to get the entire instruction book from the CEO about how they should be operating. So when Yeshua sends these letters, they're short little memos and way too little a bit of time. And Halisa does a much better job, but she does a great job actually showing and proving that the 7 letters match perfectly up with not only the Greek, the names of the word Pergamon or Sardis, red ones, how they are to, like in Sardis, they are to wake up. And she does a wonderful job showing how the ancient rabbis would correlate Yom Teruah with you're planning for your death and resurrection every Yom Teruah. You're planning to die and start afresh anew. And of course, if if Yeshua returns, his parousia is on Yom Teruah. That would be when the resurrection occurs and when those alive are gathered. So that's sort of, again, I believe it's all about the Moedim. I mean, he created them in Genesis 1:14, the sun, the moon, the constellations, and the stars for these appointed times. Everything going on in Revelation, I believe, is going to focus on and around an appointed time. And that's where Steve Mutria, he's just watching everything from this point forward. He's just watching. He's not making predictions.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everybody.
I think the Moedim have been completely forgotten in Western Christianity for the most part for the last 2,000 years. And while I think the church fathers, et cetera, have gotten a number of things right, I think they've really come up short on this because anything that looked kind of Jewish was sort of thrown out. There was very little use for anything that was from the Old Testament, thanks to this dude named Marcion.
Judaizer.
Judaizer, exactly. And so all of these different things have really hurt us in our theology. I call it haunted theology because there's something wrong, but you can't quite figure out what it is. And now that we are getting closer to the return of Christ, we're getting closer, obviously, to the end of the days. We're beginning to pick up a lot of these things. I mean, just take this. So William Tyndale, he translated the English Bible from the Greek, obviously the Hebrew, but also the Greek, into the English. That was the first time this had ever been done. He was eventually burned at the stake because the King of England was so upset about this, and he gave us the term Passover. All right, but it's crazy because in the New Testament, when Jesus is eating the Passover dinner with his disciples, in the Tyndale version, it says, "I have greatly desired to eat this Easter with you," right? And you're like, wait a second, what's going on, right? So the guy just didn't know, right? He didn't have any Jews around. There weren't any Jewish communities that you could go and ask. They were all in hiding because they were afraid of getting killed. So there was no understanding of the Jewish ways, or really, which is closer, in many respects to God's ways. They didn't understand anything about the feasts for the most part, other than just sort of a cursory knowledge. And this has really hurt us because we have missed these things. I think to some degree, God has completely allowed this to happen. And he's like, it's fine. I'm going to work with it. And I'm going to work it in there so it'll all be just right at the appointed time, right? But understanding this. Okay, so I really quickly, again, I just want to recap. Jesus was crucified on Passover. He's in the tomb for unleavened bread. He then rises on first fruits. Some people would call that Easter, but we call it first fruits or Resurrection Day. And then the Holy Spirit is given on Pentecost, or Shavuot, as you pointed out, Joel. And this does happen on the first day of the week, right? It's always a Sunday. And then we have these fall feasts that have not yet been fulfilled. And that's why we're all very suspicious that the return of Christ is going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah. Okay, so that's our very strong hunch, because everything else has happened exactly on the day of those feasts, right? And I'll tell you, I probably saw this 10, 11, 12 years ago, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this was crazy. I'm like, how did I not see this? How did I miss this? How has this not been taught? Well, again, just think about the last 2,000 years.
You were trained up in dispensationalism. That's why.
Exactly.
Those were for the Jews, Doug.
And I remember I did a teaching on this, and I felt kind of weird. I'm like, I hope they don't judge me, because I'm sort of getting into this Hebrew stuff, this Jewish stuff, and I remember them, just feeling like, man, I hope I don't lose my job over this, because they start thinking you're going too far, man. You're becoming a Jew. And like, no, guys, it's not about being a Jew. It's about doing God's stuff. Okay. And look, I just want to make it really clear. I think you can love Jesus with all your heart, soul, and all that stuff, and not have an inkling about any of this stuff. Okay. But if you want to have a better understanding of how it all is going to fit together, and how the end times are going to come about, you have to understand the feasts. If you ignore those, you're going to be lost, okay? Or you're going to be definitely off course, all right? And I think a lot of our eschatology has been off course because we have ignored a lot of these things. So now, Scott or Joel, you and I and Scott, maybe we're off a little bit on exactly what happens on Yom Teruah and exactly what happens on Yom Kippur, but we're all in agreement that these mark the return of Christ, in general, okay, and that these are very, very important. All right, and so sometimes we're arguing about a few minutes this way or a few minutes that way. Okay, so that's part of our discussion. But when you begin to see how it all comes together, man, it gets so exciting. The Feast of Sukkot, right? The Feast of Tabernacles. Well, what happens in a tabernacle? What do you do there? You dwell. And what we're told that God's going to do, he's going to dwell with mankind forever, right? So you see this so much. What happens on Yom Kippur, which is 10 days earlier? Well, this is the time of judgment. This is a time of, you need to kind of, do a little come to Jesus moment, right? You need to kind of get your soul right and get things, and I love Yom Kippur because it really feels like a kind of taking a bath for my soul. I know that Jesus he paid for my sins. I'm not trying to atone for anything myself, but I'm trying to get it out. I'm trying to, get that poison out of me and to confess it and say, Lord, I did that, and I did this other thing too, and a whole bunch more. And this is the day I'm just going to unload and acknowledge these things for, sins of omission and sins of commission. And I'm going to just dump all these at your feet and say, here you go. Right. And I feel better, and so that is going to be the time when we think it's the judgment. I think it's going to be the judgment of Matthew 25, the separation of the sheep and the goats. I believe that happens on Yom Kippur. All right. And then Jesus is going to take his seat on his throne, according to Matthew 25, when the Son of Man comes and he sits on his throne, right? And all the nations before him. That throne is the great white throne. He's going to be sitting on it, in judgment for 1,000 years. Okay. And so then when you come to Revelation 20, and there's one on the throne, who is that? That's Jesus, right? He's the one to whom all judgment has been committed, right? He's the one who sits on that throne. So yes, there'll be 1,000 years of separation, but the same courtroom, the same throne, and the same judge will all be happening right there. So this has then big implications for when Satan gets out of the abyss. When he's put in the abyss, I think will be on Yom Kippur. And then when he gets out of the abyss, I believe will happen on Yom Kippur 1,000 years later. Okay. So a lot of stuff happening there to just kind of, put it all in perspective.
So let's talk about Laura Lee. And she said, when I was a Seventh-day Adventist, I kept asking why we didn't keep the feast. I was told by numerous people that they were for the Jews, Judaizers. Yeah. It didn't sit well with me.
Yeah. And I put that up there because it's interesting, because the Seventh-day Adventists are one of the few denominations that have recognized that Rome is the one that changed the Sabbath. Rome owns it. Rome admits it. The other denominations will fight you tooth and nail. John MacArthur, et cetera. He hates the Roman Catholic doctrine, but he is sucking on their teat when it comes to Mama. I mean, she's the mother of harlots, and John MacArthur is her little stepchild. And he defends Sunday worship. He defends Easter. He defends Christmas. And there's zero biblical support for it. There is no sola scripture when it comes to Sunday. And I'll give Mama Rome credit. They own it. They admit that they're in error. They claim, they will admit nothing in scripture changes Sabbath to Sunday. We did it because we're the vicar on earth.
It's in the catechism. It's in the catechism. I mean, they say the seventh day Sabbath is Saturday.
Well,
right?
But Protestants push into Revelation 1 and say the day of the Lord. Well, that's
nonsense.
That's
they have no scriptural basis for it whatsoever.
500 years.
No scriptural. But the reason I put this up here is our Seventh-day Adventists do understand Sabbath, but Laura Lee, who obviously was raised Seventh-day,
one of the Moedim.
Joel, let me finish.
Yeah.
Seventh-day Adventists who get this right have whiffed on the Moedim. It's only been in these last 40, 50, 60 years that people, more and more people beginning in the 60s and 70s, starting with the Jesus movement, starting with more and more Jews converting, that people have begun to see this. Like, and again, there's all kinds of crazy calendars. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but I believe right now, as long as you're loving others and not like casting them into the lake of fire or castigating severe judgment upon them, I think God's looking at your heart, where at least you're trying to honor. Like, maybe I was wrong, this past week when I did the New Covenant meal on Monday night, and then I observed Passover Tuesday evening, and then had a Sabbath, all day on Wednesday, where I did not work at all. In other words, that's what I did. I might have missed it by a day, but I believe right now it's you ask 10 different people who've studied this, you might again get 20 different opinions on the calendar. One of the guys in the chat's even talking about the lunar Sabbath, and I think I can speak for the panel. We think the lunar Sabbath is loony. So
very
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, but again, I would not, if a brother is keeping the lunar Sabbath and that's where he's convicted and that's what he thinks, hey, at least he's trying, I would talk to him, differ, but okay, you're trying. So it's the division that gets me.
She follows up by saying that the Adventists say that the feasts have been done away with. They definitely haven't. I mean, there's obviously so much evidence in the book of Acts. Okay, Paul is like eager to get back to Jerusalem to keep the feast. This is after Christ. Now, when I was a dispensationalist, what I would hear is, well, that was a transitional book. Right?
Oh my!
Yeah.
When did it end? When did Paul write the memo saying that it stopped?
I mean, it's just so crazy, like that was a transitional book, and it's like, well, okay, we don't have a temple, so we don't have to go to a physical place because there's no temple, granted, but the day still exists, right? That hasn't changed, and so I'm very grateful that the Jews have done a very good job of keeping these feasts alive, and that's why they're said to be Jewish. So the Jews have been the guardians of these things. But they're not Jewish. Yeah, they're not Jewish, right? And the witness, of course, but they're God's feasts, and a lot of people are waking up to this. So it's quite exciting to see where these things are so important. And frankly, they're a lot of fun, right? So they're obviously they're prophetic. They have all kinds of significance, and you get to eat, so it's not a half bad deal. So let's talk about Yom Teruah, right? So the Feast of Trumpets.
That's my next slide.
Okay.
All right. So let me click over to this, and you guys can see it. You can jump in anytime you want to. So basically, let me move forward. Whoop. Let me make sure that I move forward. There we go. Okay. So all of the feasts are really based on agricultural production. Barley is the first one, with Passover and the whole weeks included with Passover there. And then wheat would be Shavuot. And then grapes would be, well, basically, you've got, let's see, here it is. Barley, of course, Passover, wheat, Shavuot, grapes, mid-August. But that's leading into the fall festivals. And then olives are right after that during the rainy time of Heshvan. So it's just interesting. It's agricultural.
Yeah. So, and let me jump in here. So what is Jesus going to do in Revelation chapter 14? He's going to tread the grapes, right? He's going to tread the grapes, right?
Do you think he's going to tread the grapes during that time?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay,
what happens in
that works.
All right, so what happens in Isaiah 63, right? Who is this coming from? Bozrah. He has his garments stained, right? He's been trampling everybody in his incredible zeal, right? He's been doing all this trampling kind of stuff, right? So, and it says it casted the sickle, for the harvest is ripe, right? So all this imagery to harvesting. And so the final harvest is obviously happening in the fall, especially grapes.
Shameless plug here. I'm hosting, but you two are invited. I'm hosting Nathan Harmon. We're going to be talking about Gilead he's been doing a lot of work in the modern day country of Jordan. And I will say that there are many people that are believers in Yeshua in Jordan. Obviously, they keep it on the down low, but there's like a restoration. I don't like to use the term revival, but there is an awakening happening. And then when you really start to look at it and you understand, Gilead, Bozrah, those areas are Israel. I mean, right now they're currently in the modern nation state of Jordan, but that's where Reuben, Manasseh, and what other tribe was it? Asher? What other tribe was on the eastern side of the Jordan? There was one other tribe that settled on the eastern side. But anyway, that's so
Reuben.
We're going to be doing it this coming next Wednesday, and if you guys want to join us, but I think that's going to be interesting. Talking about maybe a place of protection in the wilderness during the Great Tribulation. So anyway, Doug mentioned Bozrah, and I wanted to bring it up because that will be a topic we're discussing as far as
That's
Gilead
cool.
and Bozrah and that area, that geographical area, which a lot of times we forget about it. We forget that modern day Jordan, parts of modern day Jordan, are within the borders of the ancient Israel land.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue on, Joel.
Okay, so let me make sure. Whoop, I went too far. Okay, so we're into the fall festivals. It does not say Rosh Hashanah in the Torah. As you can read off to the right-hand side, it talks about Yom Teruah, but it never says Rosh Hashanah anywhere in the Bible. It is a modern Jewish theory, that's the correct name for it, but that would be head of the year, Rosh Hashanah. It is the Feast of Trumpets, but specifically, it's a teruah call, which is a staccato call. And the calls are listed off in Numbers 10. Okay, and so you see Yom Teruah down below, but you wonder if they're right. Like, here's what they're doing. They're citing then 1 Thessalonians 4:16, which is a tekiah call, and they're citing it with a teruah call. So, Numbers 10, God says, don't cite this call with that particular situation because you'll bump into each other, and you're supposed to be godly and good, in what you do. So you have to know.
Are there different Greek words? I
Yeah,
mean, you're saying that, but what's the Greek word for a teruah call versus
So there's 4636 and 4637. Selpizo is 4637.
Selpingo, yeah.
Selpinga is the term for these are the tekiah type calls. So if you were looking for a tekiah call at the end of days, it would be a selpingus, megas in the Greek, and in the Hebrew it would be Gadola. It would be a teruah, tekiah Gadola. So know your calls, people. Know your calls. Don't go running outside. So keep in mind all 7 of the trumpet calls. Yeah. But
also keep in mind that when God came down on Mount Sinai, his voice was like a trumpet, right?
Sure.
It was like a great trumpet call. It was like the sound of a great shofar. When Jesus spoke in Revelation, John says, I turned and I saw one speaking to me whose voice was like that of a great trumpet. So, I think that when Jesus is going to send out the angels there in 1 Thessalonians 4, I think the quality of his voice is that of the trumpet of God, right? It's the voice of the trumpet of God. So
you are biblically
whether this
correct,
archangel,
you are biblically correct. Yeah. Well, because in Joshua 6, it is the shout. It's the ruah shout. And in Revelation 19, it's the ruah again. It's a shout. So biblically, you're correct with that. Shouts are important. Okay. The other thing is you were mentioning Revelation 1:1, which is semiano in the Greek, and that is a teruah call. So in Revelation 1:1, when you're reading that, the sign, so to speak, signifying it, is a teruah call. Yeshua sounds like a war or battle type call. So know your calls, be aware of that, and keep in mind that then in the fall festivals, you should be watching for the new moon. And then that's the 7th month because you've counted 6 months from the Aviv harvest, and then the first month in the fall. If you read real carefully into not Daniel, Ezekiel 40 verse 1, you'll see there's a hint at a Yom Teruah there, or Yom Teruah, or a Rosh Hashanah rather. And so otherwise, it isn't really scriptural that much. The whole thing is basically found here, and you can read it right here. So it's announced. The convocation is announced with blasts. Those are Teruah calls. So ta 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 ta. And Numbers 10 kind of lists off what a Teruah sounds like and what it means. It's war or battle. One person blasting is going to be for just the leaders. Two, either shofars, shofarim, or trumpets means everybody. Everybody show up for either war battle or ingathering. Those are the two options so far. Okay. Did you want to ask the question here, Matthew?
No, I just pointed out another passage in Matthew where Yeshua mentions, and he shall send his messengers with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together as chosen ones from the four winds from one end. And then YouTube doesn't let you post all of it. So
that's going to be confusing because this is that megas, selpingus, or selpidze. And so the problem is, then when you get to Thessalonians, you're going to notice that it's the last, the eschaton, selpingus. So we obviously have to reconcile. Something has to be the last one and the great one when we get to that resurrection time.
And not, I don't align with him, but I don't think he's crazy. Steve Mutria makes a very good argument because there's a lot of trumpets going on at Shavuot at Mount Sinai. That is a date he is also looking for as a potential for the gathering, the resurrection. And I don't think it's crazy whatsoever. It certainly goes against the mainstream, even amongst those of us who now, observe the feast to the best we can, or try to keep them and understand their prophetic significance. He would be definitely in the minority, but I would encourage anybody, if they're interested in this topic, to listen to some of his teachings on how Shavuot actually could be fulfilling the verses Joel just mentioned and put up. Again, I'm not saying it won't happen on the Shavuot. Right now, I would still lean, if you were asking me to, place a bet, I'd be leaning toward Yom Teruah at this point in time. So
we'll discuss all of these things and more. Stick with us. So basically, moving forward here, we've got this slide, and let me make sure that I can click to my next slide. Okay, so once again, this particular slide on the left is linking Leviticus 23:24 with the blowing of the trumpets of the Holy Convocation, and then they're citing Joel 2:1 after that, which is interesting. So I have Joel 2:1 down below. Below the tekiah, the shofar in Zion, shout an alarm. It's a haruah. So what, as Doug and I mentioned, a ruah is a call, and God speaks like a call. And we don't know what the ruah sounds like. It's just kind of a shout. Joshua 6 kind of goes through that too. And on my holy mountain, let all living in the land tremble, for the day of Adonai is coming. It is upon us. Interesting.
And that, ever since I've sort of always believed in a 7,000 year redemptive plan, but that day of the Lord there, it's 1,000 years. I mean, the first part of that day is great for those in covenant, those who are saved. And it's not really a good time for those who are out of covenant, who have not repented by then. But that day gets much better. So I think that day of Yah, that day of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, begins on a Yom Teruah. And back to your point, Joel, earlier about how our Jewish brothers call it the head of the year. I actually do believe that God flipped the calendar. Why did he have to tell Moses, this is the first of months for you?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, I believe that initially, when everything was set up, that Tishri 1, or what is now the 7th month, was the first month. What was the 7th month is now, and so I believe that's what's happening here, and everything ends in the fall. So Halisa does a great job explaining how they've arrived at this being the head of the year, and obviously Yom Kippurim, that's when the Jubilee is announced. In other words, so that is actually when it goes into effect. So
yes. At the end,
I don't think our Jewish brothers are cray for calling it the head of the year, or
no. It's just a matter of habit. you know.
Well, it's tradition.
Yeah, it is. It is. And they've been doing this for 4,000 years, and we've been doing this
Well,
for
and there's
15,
something
20
behind
years.
it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a good job
Yeah.
showing that.
And there's a
I was just going to say she does a good job
tradition
showing
that
the scripture. Go ahead.
yeah. And there's also a tradition that when they were in the wilderness, you know, that people would start dying on on Yom Kippur, right? So the men that were 4 or 20 years and above that did not get to go into the wilderness, that they, you know, if they made it past another Yom Kippur, then they're like, oh, I made it, okay. And that's kind of the sentiment that you have when you celebrate this, is they're like, you know, may your name be inscribed in the book of life, right? They kind of feel like, okay, I made it, you know, and so you sort of begin the year again, or, you know, anew from that point. And I don't think it's that dissimilar to what we have in our own calendar, you know, that we have lots of New Years. We just, you know, celebrated a tax year, right? So now that's going to begin a new year, right?
You could celebrate it.
Well, you know, for those of us, yeah, I wasn't happy sending my money, but it's all good. So, okay, so we're almost out of time, Joel. So I'm just
we are.
that we're
Well,
still in the weeds.
I'm overprepared. Just so you're aware, I completely overprepared.
I know that. I can see that. So, you know, again, so the fall feast, right? This is what we're looking forward to, the Feast of Trumpets. I really do think that's when the Lord's going to return, and we have these 10 days in there, and I think this is where Jesus is going to be fighting against the forces of darkness. You know, when I was learning eschatology, it seemed like Jesus comes back and everyone just sort of drops dead, and that's that. But there's called the Battle of Armageddon, right? There's going to be a huge battle that will take place in Jerusalem, mind you, not up in the Megiddo Valley. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be over in just a blink. I think that Jesus is going to come. He's going to have a real fight on his hands. Not that he can't handle it, but, you know, the whole nations of the world are coming to Jerusalem with the purpose of fighting him who is coming on the white horse, right? We're told that there are going to be these 3 spirits that will go out of the mouth of Satan, the beast, and the false prophet, and they look like frogs. They're demons, and they go out to the kings of the earth to gather them to battle of the great day of the Lord, right? So they know what they're doing, right? Now they may not know that it's truly God, but that they know that some being is coming, and they're coming to get ready to fight against him, right? So this is going to be huge. And we see all of this talk about the battle, especially in the book of Zechariah, chapters 12, 13 and 14, 12 and 14 especially. So, you know, all of that is going to be happening. This is when, I think that is when the Gog-Magog war is going to happen. I think Gog-Magog is the same thing as Armageddon. I think they are exactly one and the same. I think that Gog is the beast. I think, you know, again, they're one and the same. His name means death or enmity, and it's an intensification of that death and enmity. And so I think this is going to be when God is going to come. And wow, talk about epic that's going to be happening, beginning here at the Feast of Trumpets, right? The day that no one knows the day or the hour. Now, I would also say that the day that no one knows the day or the hour, that is when God is going to resurrect his people. That's when he's going to put his followers, those who follow him, love him, he's going to put them into their chambers until the indignation is past, for the Lord comes out of his place to judge the inhabitants of the earth, right? So I think that's gonna happen on the Feast of Trumpets, and wherever those chambers are, I don't know. You know, is it behind a rock? Is it in some dimensional space? I don't know. But, you know, he'll put us someplace safe until he defeats all of the armies of the world. And boy, is it going to ever get epic. I mean, the earth is going to go through some crazy, radical changes at this point. And a lot of people, you know, are going to die, sadly.
The one thing I would not even push back on, Doug, but it's common. I used to say it about the day and the hour. I mean, I've been a prophecy geek since I was a kid. And when you're talking to fellow Christians, I think it's sort of like judge not lest you be judged when it comes to prophecy. When people don't want to talk about it, they'll go, no one knows the day or the hour, so we don't even need to talk about it. No one knows the day or the hour. But Messiah 2030, and he hasn't given me permission to say who produced it. You guys probably know. I think I told you. But if we actually look at the context of that verse, it says, truly I say to you, this generation shall by no means pass until all this takes place. The heaven and the earth shall pass away, but my word shall by no means pass away. But concerning that day and the hour, no one knows. What's the preceding sentence? It's not his coming. It's not the gathering. It's heaven and earth passing away. And that would be at the end of the time domain, after the end of that sentence.
No, see, I disagree with you there. I disagree. I have to disagree.
You're just going to ignore the preceding verse then?
No, I'm not. No, not at all.
The heaven and earth shall pass away. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows.
Yeah. Well, my dear friend, if we go to Revelation chapter 6, the sky was rolled up like a scroll and taken away. I mean, that is the heavens and the earth right there passing away, right? So the heavens are going to literally, so there's some kind of a veil between heaven and earth that is going to roll up. I mean, how else will the heavens roll up like a scroll?
Well, I can't see the heaven and earth passing away. In other words, like ceasing to exist. In obviously, there's going to be a change when the veil is rolled
massive
back.
Change. Yes.
But again, when we start looking at, we don't really get much information about what happens after the time domain ends. We really don't.
Well, I don't think time does not ever end. So that's definitely
it just moves forward.
It does not ever
we
end.
We don't know that. Again, you're speculating.
Yes, we do. Yeah, no, I'm not speculating. I'm not. I 100%. No, 1,000%.
I can argue that it keeps on going in the Greek and the Hebrew.
So
what passage would you say that
I would go to Revelation chapter 22, where you have the trees of life who yield fruit every month. Okay.
No sun.
Okay, every month. No, there is a sun. No, you're totally wrong on that one, my friend. You're totally wrong.
Where does it say there's a sun?
The sun. Okay, Isaiah chapter 24.
No, in Revelation it does not say there's a sun. There's no need for a sun. That's
right,
what it says.
in the New Jerusalem. Jerusalem. But God also says that if the ordinances ever depart from before me, then I will give up on the seed of Israel. Jeremiah chapter 31. Okay, and it says in Psalm 148 that he created the sun, moon, and the stars, right? Which will endure forever. Okay, so I got you on that one. I'm sorry, but the sun, moon, and stars never ever go away. They never ever go away. The ordinances never ever go away. But the New Jerusalem does not have a need for the sun, because God, his light is brighter than the sun, but the sun endures forever, right? So, and the moon endures forever, and we're going to have time forever, because there will be months, right? And if there are months, that suggests that there's a moon, right? There's still the big clock in the sky, right? Which are for the Moedim, for the times and the seasons. Those will never go away. So I think one major thing that you're taking from dispensationalism, if I'm any, is that somehow time will be no more. But that's a misunderstanding from the King James. What is it in Revelation chapter 10? Or one of those, I don't know, where it says, and time will be no more. Like, it's just saying that there's going to be no more delay. Right? That's all it's saying. The idea that time goes away is incorrect, because we still have.
There's no time in eternity. There is not time.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. No. Well, it's unending. It's unending. It's a clock that doesn't end. It's a clock that doesn't end. But okay, so you tell me. So tell me the river of life and the trees of life.
It says the heavens and earth will pass away.
The fruit every what? Fruit every month, right? Every month. Okay, so there you go.
Again, but once you're in the eternal state, the clock stops. There's no clock. There is no clock.
The clock never stops. That's the whole point.
Well,
the clock
well,
never
that
stops.
we can agree, right? Right now we're on
right.
12.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, we won't really care about the clock per se, but the clock keeps on ticking. Okay. It keeps there's a passage of time, as it were, but it's certainly very different in our experience than what we have today, because there will not be entropy. There will not be things falling apart. Right. So, here we have a kind of a sense of, oh, I can see that guy, he's about 60 years old, because I kind of know what a 60-year-old looks like, because he's, slowly falling apart. When you get to be 90, you're like, yeah, he's really frail now because he's falling apart. Right. And you can tell that your car is 30 years old because it's falling apart, but, but there, if you have a car that's 30 years old, not that we'll have cars, but it won't be falling apart. A guy who's 1,000,000 years old, he's still 1,000,000, but he's not falling apart. So there will not be that sense of the time as we understand it today, but there will still be very much time.
I will close with this. Everybody listen to part 3 of Messiah 2030, and he has an hour and a half of uninterrupted time to prove the point about what is being referred to as about not knowing the day or the hour, is referring to when the heavens and the earth pass away at the end of the 7th day. So, yeah, that's okay.
Well, that's an opinion, but I know mine's a minority opinion. That's okay.
Opinions are like armpits.
That's right.
I use the nicer term. So.
Yeah,
there you go. Well, this has been awesome, Joel. Thank you for preparing all that stuff. Appreciate it. Everyone, we thank you for joining us. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really does help that good old algorithm out there. And we're trying to get up to 100,000 subscribers. That's really the goal. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Chuck Hamp, and man, give it a coffee a day or something like that. And it really makes a huge difference. So thank you guys. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if I get 5 more subscribers, I'm up to a whopping 2,000. So
look at here, man. You're coming along. You're coming along. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. We're glad that you joined us, and we will see you next time. God